Hey, Jason. Good morning. How are
Kathy,
you? It's that time again. We
it
get
is.
to
Can
do
you believe it?
transportation talk.
We do. One of the most favorite parts of the week for me is to hang out with you here, talking to our local community, helping our local community, being there for our local community. I don't know what else would be more fun to do while I'm sitting here at my office and my desk.
I'm totally with you. This is my favorite part of the week because it is the time of the week that I feel like I get to reach out and participate and engage with the community in a helpful way, even though at this point it's just us talking to them, hopefully about issues that our community finds helpful and useful. One of these days we'll be able to do much more in-person stuff, but for now, this is a great way to create some resources without being able to be out there. And so I'm
Yeah,
super excited every week when we get to do this.
admit it, Kathy. This is a virtual hug to our community,
It is. That is
right?
exactly what I was thinking. Absolutely.
Yes,
As
yes.
cheesy as that may sound or whatever,
It's very cheesy.
it's what some of us live for that feeling that you're doing something for somebody else and that is
Absolutely.
benefiting them and that is a good thing, that you're being good in that way. And so this is exactly what that is. This feeds that need for me that I'm providing something that is good for our community. And so it's such a joy to be here. And
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm
So
telling you, it is so cool. Yeah.
last week we were doing this show about planning a trip out of the area. And I know
Yep.
that for me, that show has been kind of rattling around in my head. And we had a little conversation about, what that means to different people and um, different perspectives about that. And so we
Yeah,
thought we'd
definitely.
talk some more about it and talk about it in a different way.
Yeah, last week we had a really good guest on, one of our customer service representatives, Eric Barton,
Hmm.
mans the Seaside office down there in Seaside, and he had some great pieces of advice. And I think what it did is it spurred us, right? We're like,
Hmm.
wow, there's more here.
Right. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so definitely being able to discuss all of the options that we have, how to get into doing these things is so important. But you know what, Kathy? There's one thing that we had kind of talked about this a little bit, is where we're at when it comes to stress and how we can mitigate that stress or those anxieties as we look to try to travel out of area, long distance trips and so forth. So
Right.
so this is going to be a really nice way to just give out more information than what we did last week, but also kind of like you had mentioned earlier, kind of come at it from a little different angle, kind of,
Yeah.
from the experiences that I have when I travel train individuals, right?
Sure.
There's
Yes. And I
get to
mean,
see that all the time.
yeah. And I want to just refer to last week's show where we talked about the first step of planning a trip outside of the
Yeah.
area. Really, this goes for any trip that you're going to plan without a car, whether it's outside of the area or in the area.
Yep.
And we kind of just brushed over it really pretty lightly. And
Yeah, we
and I
did.
don't I want to, it's good that we get a chance to talk about it some more because the step of overcoming the fear of traveling without a car, we didn't mean to make light of it because that can actually be a really big deal. A really big deal that can affect your ability to get out there in general
Absolutely.
or specifically without a car.
Well,
So,
Kathy, yeah, there's
yeah.
so many reasons why we need to be thinking about this right now,
Hmm.
right? I mean, gas prices have always been high, but they're just getting higher, right?
Yeah.
Insurance is getting
Yeah.
more. People, in their vehicles, they've kind of put off maybe maintaining their vehicles a little bit, so their vehicles are breaking down. So people are looking at alternative methods to get around, and one of the
Hmm.
best is to get around is through public transportation. And you're right. In most cases, people look at public transportation and have a little bit of a fear,
Yeah. That
simply
ain't,
because it's a
yeah.
new thing. There's that
Right. And that
anxiety, right?
anxiety can be immobilizing
It
in
can be.
general. And
Yeah, it can
so,
freeze you up.
yeah. And so today we'll talk about it, all those steps again, but really bringing that fear to the forefront and
Yeah.
trying to talk about, how to do these things with that fear and how to work with that and what are the tools and where are the tools and how do we travel train, how do you travel train
Yeah.
in person, and how do you use these shows to help you with that ability to get out and use public
Yeah.
transit and help overcome that fear and that first challenge, that
There you
block.
go. How do we overcome that fear? That is exactly right. And I'm gonna spit a number out, Kathy, and it's gonna come to a little bit of a shock. 40 million. And I don't mean dollars. No, I am not talking about dollars here. I am talking about 40 million Americans, roughly 20% of our population suffer from anxiety.
Mm.
And that's I guess that might not be
That's
shocking to some
significant.
others.
That's a big number.
Yeah, it is a big number. And there are, Kathy, there's a whole lot of reasons why these people suffer with anxiety. I have to admit, I suffer from anxiety from time to time for a variety of reasons. Sometimes I'm not very good. I know others might not be very good in public speaking, but sometimes I just get so nervous, I make myself sick and so forth. So I feel and kind of have an understanding behind the anxiety that others may be feeling. But I'm telling you what, there's some serious, they call them triggers, for anxiety. And one of them, surprisingly, is transportation.
Yeah.
That
I
anxiety,
believe it.
I don't have a vehicle. What am I going to do? I can't put gas. I can't afford to put gas in my car this month. What am I going to do? I have a job. And if I miss, or if I'm late just one more time to my work, they're going to fire me. I have a family. What am I going to do? I need to get medicine. What am I going to do? All these things, right? Come up and cause stress and anxiety. And I wanted to kind of, what does that mean in transportation, right? What does that look like in transportation? Well, Kathy, how about this? A lack of control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Suddenly you're adding another layer of something that you can't control and that you just don't know, what to do about.
Oh yeah. My wife says I am a social butterfly, which isn't entirely true. But sometimes I do get nervous when I'm surrounded by strangers. Well, guess what? When you're on public transportation, train, bus, plane, whatsoever, what's happening? You're surrounded by people you don't know.
And not only that, but you don't have a way to get away from them.
Yeah, you don't. You're there.
Yeah.
How about unfamiliar terrain? Have you ever been in an area? You've traveled the world, Kathy, so you know what it's like to be in unfamiliar terrain. I'd like to say I like to kind of, when I go learn new transportation systems, I like to kind of get out and get lost for a day.
Sure.
But that doesn't always work out. There are times where I'm a little fearful of getting lost, for example. And
sure.
And what about being in confined spaces? You already talked about that a little bit. We have nowhere really to go in a lot of the modes of transportation, right? So those are some of the things that really, I would like to say right now, prevent people from not only doing regular inter-county, inter-city public transportation, but going away from their hometown, even to just Portland from Astoria, and perhaps even out of state. That's a massive roadblock to some people, and perhaps something we need to help them get over.
Yeah. And so last week we talked about the different steps, and planning ahead is one of those steps. And so when you know that you suffer from anxieties that are triggered by different things, your planning ahead might look a little bit different. So whether there's reservations necessary or not, it's good to do a little bit of extra research, and maybe that's making that extra phone call, or you're spending a little bit more time researching and getting that schedule in your hand and printing it out so you have it as a resource in your pocket. And it's also a sense of security. That way, if the battery dies, if the internet doesn't work, if all of those things, you're covered because you have a paper piece of the schedule in your hand. That's a sense of security in your hand. So that's a tool of being prepared.
Well, and a nice thing about that too, Kathy, I don't know about you or others out there, but I sometimes like to take notes from materials from agencies and districts like ours, because I'm sometimes more comfortable with how I arrange my own notes. Sometimes the way I design my directions, I don't want to say it's better, but it works for me.
Right.
And that's something that I really like. So I really appreciate you talking about writing stuff down, having that put in your back pocket or whatever. Well, yeah, that helps me too, because I'm comfortable with it. I wrote it and I know what to do,
Well,
so.
and sometimes it's a matter, maybe you don't want to carry the piece of paper around with you, but you take a picture of things with your phone and you have a
Yeah,
picture ready,
there you go.
or
Right.
you've researched what the place is going to look like, where you
Yep.
start, where you end, so that you know visually, what it looks like, what to
Yeah.
expect.
So, Kathy, we have an individual, let's say, who is very stressed out about even doing what we're talking about there, right? Maybe they've tried to write down their own directions and just haven't succeeded, according to their own way of doing things. So they've thrown that away a few times, right? Well, maybe they're putting a little too much pressure on themselves. Maybe they need to kind of ease in to public transit a little bit more. Maybe taking that long trip to Idaho or to California on the bus might not be something you want to do right away as your first,
or Tillamook,
or to Tillamook, right? So really, one thing that we would like to advise people, as you're planning ahead, don't bite off too much, right? Let's get you going on the inner city routes, the routes that you can see and look, and you're in your hometown. Maybe you've taken them before. Maybe you've had friends and family locally who've taken them before. Most importantly, we're here locally. We're here, right?
Or, I mean, even if you haven't taken them before, your own town and what it looks like
Yeah.
and what it's supposed to look like where you get to. So
Right.
you find out where your closest bus stop is, and you decide you're going to get on that bus and you're
Yep.
going to ride it to, the next closest thing that you need. If you're in Seaside, maybe you ride it up to Fred Meyer, and you know what Fred
Yep.
Meyer looks like. It's a great
Exactly.
big landmark. There's no mistaking it. So you
Yep.
get on the bus and then you figure out how to get to the next big thing. And so
Absolutely.
you have a small success, which is a huge point to jump off from. And then okay, I can do this. And then you
Yeah.
can get back from Fred Meyer back to the stop that you started out at, because you know what it looks like, because you've already figured that part out.
Absolutely. When I travel train individuals, we come up with that solution, right? Like you just mentioned, about, hey, your local area, where you can go. In some cases, if you get lost or you miss a bus, you're in your town, right? So you're a little more comfortable that way. But let's say now that we've gotten comfortable with that and we've gotten pretty good at doing that. Well, next step then, in our desire to get out and stretch and spread our wings and get out a little further, is to now go inter-county, right? And in our case, we have the connector services, which our two most closest connector partners are Tillamook County to the south and Columbia County to the north, right?
Yeah.
And so we can now expand and maybe go there because we've got our local district down. So now let's expand. We're saying, okay, you know what? I'm gonna move up a level now, and we're gonna go out a little further. And you do that a few times and get used to that and understand and learn with that. Then now that gives you a little more critical response to what you're doing. You have to be a little more observant, put some really good training wheels on for, say, I guess you start taking those training wheels off now and start recognizing how to help yourself while you're out away now from your comfort zone, even though it's just to Tillamook or Columbia counties, right?
Yep, exactly. I mean, that works great. Is you're just practicing, you're getting to know what your visual cues are, you're getting to know where your next stop is.
Yep.
I mean, it's just, you're getting used to what being on the bus feels like, what kinds of interactions you might have. You get to know the drivers, things like that. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get in those situations. And then you're more able to handle the expected and the unexpected that way.
Absolutely.
Because you're just getting more comfortable.
And then once you've kind of mastered that, then you know what it's time to do to help alleviate now that stress and anxiety is kind of fading a little bit, right? So now maybe what you do is say, well, you know what? I want to take the next step, and you take your trip up to Portland. And we have a way to get there. Our Lower Columbia connector can get you up to Portland 3 times a day and bring you back home 3 times a day.
Right.
And it gives you an opportunity now to go up and experience. You take our system up to Portland, and now you start taking TriMet system to get around Portland area. So you now got to start training yourself. You can take the things that you've learned from doing your local trips here, then doing regional, and now it's time to go to Portland.
Yep.
So now you've really gotten to a really good state if you've gotten well versed in going to Portland and learning how to get around up there in a bigger city and so forth, right?
Right. Well, because now you've practiced on your own system, you've gotten
Yep.
comfortable on a bus, and you realize when you get to the next place, there's a similarity. There's a similarity between the schedules, between the types
Yeah,
of buses, the way that they work, the way that drivers, work. Everybody does things a little bit differently, but you've gotten comfortable so that small difference doesn't throw you off anymore. You're able to deal
absolutely.
with it. And then it's, because you've become comfortable with riding public transit, you suddenly have this whole new world that doesn't trigger that anxiety the way that it used to, and if it
Right.
does,
Yes.
you have tools that you've
Yep.
learned from riding on your own system close to home to deal with it, whether
That's
that's
right.
getting off and taking a breather while you wait for the next bus, or talking to the bus driver, or just looking out the window in a particular way, counting to 10, taking in the scenery. All of those things are tools
Yep.
that help you be able to then explore public transit in a larger system. And so I think one of the great things about that is that then you start to notice how similar they are. And Jason, I actually took a trip fairly recently. So I have some pictures I want to show and kind of
Oh
talk through if
yeah.
you don't mind. Um,
Please. Yeah, that'd
I'm
be
gonna
great.
I'm gonna pull them up or try and pull them up, see what happens. Sometimes the computer likes to work and sometimes it doesn't. And here we go. And I'm going to hit share, and I hope you're seeing my pictures now.
Indeed, I am.
All right.
Yes.
So
Free public transportation.
I was on a trip, and this was actually all the way on the other side of the country. And one of the things that you notice is that it says, immediately my eye was drawn to free. And then I see
Yeah.
that it's public transportation. And this is one of the ways that you get around Boston. And if you look at the way that the machine is set up, it's very similar to the way the machines are set up in other places. TriMet runs
Yeah.
their ticketing very similarly, and people just, you show up and you put in your form of payment and you choose a ticket and off you go. And then I was in Rhode Island,
Nice.
and look, their buses there look very similar to the buses that TriMet uses and that we
Yep.
use on our longer routes. And so there's
Hmm.
a comfort level that you establish when you see these buses. You're like, oh, I know how to get on that. I know
Yeah, they're
where
relatively
to get
familiar,
off.
right?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
there's that
Yeah.
level of familiarity. So I don't get stressed out when I see it. And then,
Yeah.
this is one of our bus stops, and we have our
Hmm.
bus shelter there. And then this is the one that's over by the Seaside Cinema. So
Right.
this transit stop services different types of transit, whether it's our local transit that services just our county. It also services the Point bus, which can
Right.
take you directly from here into Portland. And so you just kind of get this familiar sense when you see a bus stop. You're like, oh, I know what that's for. I know how to deal with it. And if you
Good.
take the Point bus, this is one of the stops that it'll take you to. This is the stop in Portland that you get to, and it's at the Sunset Transit Center. And if you were to want to take the MAX, this is where you would get out of to get to the MAX tracks. If you took the elevator, there's an elevator there. Did you know? So if you have mobility
Well,
issues,
nice.
you don't have to worry about the stairs.
That is so
So
good.
there's
In
the
fact,
entrance to the MAX, to the elevator at Sunset
yep,
Transit Station. If you're there during the daytime, I don't know if you noticed, there's a little Java kiosk. You can get yourself a coffee.
that's
If you've
nice.
got to wait a little while, you can do that. There's also a park and ride there. So you'll find often at transit stops, they're kind of grouped together so that it's conveniently located. So you can use a car to get to, you can park and then take the transit from there. Did you see? There's our Point stop that comes right from Astoria, Seaside, Cannon Beach. I'm trying to, there's a Java station. Get yourself
There we go. And
coffee.
they have hot dogs there too. Check that out.
Yeah, get some food, get a
Nice.
snack. So if you have little bit longer of a wait, you can have a little nourishment. So I find if you look around on the internet, you can find pictures like this too. So then you have
Yes.
a certain familiarity. And guess what this is? I think that, once you see the ticket kiosk and where to buy your fare, you become more familiar with it. And that's how I
Indeed.
spotted the one in Boston too. There we go. That's what the signs look like there. So anyway,
Well, Kathy, it's nice that you're bringing this up because I did do a travel training with an individual with sight impairment.
uh-huh.
And they were very, very nervous. They had a lot of anxiety about going they knew that they were going to hop on the point bus and eventually get to the Sunset Transit Center.
Mm-hmm.
And they were scared to death, but they got up there and were eventually able to find their way around quite easily, actually, through some of the things that we learned in training, right? So they had a really good base of training and was able to apply that there. And ultimately, in the end, and we're going to talk about this a little bit before we end the show, but they weren't afraid to ask for help. So I believe that it was right there at that Java station where they walked up to, and they were ironically, he told me that he could kind of smell his way to the Java location.
Absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
that's
that
one
was
of
a
the
great
best
way.
things about a coffee kiosk. Is
Yes.
You can smell it. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And he was there and he was able to get proper guidance from that person that was in that little kiosk there and get himself onto a bus. And of course, then after that, the rest of the system was very complimentary to him and stuff. So it worked out really well. And that system, that you say is familiar. In the end, he said, you know what? The travel training that he received here, learning how to access our transit center here in Clatsop County, helped him to know what to look for when he got up to Portland. So I thought that was pretty cool. And he lives up there now, but he keeps in touch with me and tells me he's getting around just fine. And so I think that's awesome. Great. Took some of that anxiety away.
I mean, I show those pictures because I thought that they were helpful. And if we put them out there and people are able to literally see what the places look like, that they become less scary that way because you become more familiar with them. And so those were my pictures, but there's also lots of pictures on the internet. That's one of the great things about the internet, that if you want to see what it looks like where you're going, you can Google that specific spot and chances are there's pictures of it.
And those chances are really good too. I haven't come across a particular situation yet where I haven't been able to at least see a blurry satellite image of it or something from Google Maps, or even Google Earth does a really good job of getting there. Another thing too is Street View. I think that's what you were alluding to in some cases. Street View is immensely helpful when it comes to figuring out exactly where you need to be. In fact, that helped me out. I've been up to Sunset Transit Center quite a few times, but I still felt like, well, boy, I better look at it. But the Street View of that whole entire complex is very robust and gave me a good opportunity to be able to work with that person in real time and help them out. So, but I'll tell you what, Kathy, it sounds like you're really kind of all these things, these pictures, these ways that we're helping people relieve some stress, trying to assign to themselves, ways to be able to learn systems and asking for help and stuff. It really feels like somebody's putting together maybe like an equation, like a math problem, right? And solving it and figuring out if it works for them.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm excited to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And whether that the person that's going to be traveling is able to do that for themselves, to do all the calculations and give themselves enough buffer room so they are not creating stress, or whether they need our help to do it.
Right.
Both of those are completely valid options. And sometimes it's, even if you do it yourself, you want to have somebody else do it too, so you can compare and see how well you did, or whether what you thought works. And so, that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah. And, Kathy, I don't know if this is the same for you, but I mean, I do get a little bit of fear when I hop on a new transit system, or sometimes even when I'm hopping on our transit system and I'm in a rush and things aren't so well planned for me. I usually write stuff down. So I want to make sure that if someone's out there right now and they're considering riding the bus, that feel a little anxiety about riding the bus or public transportation, write stuff down. Write down what you had mentioned it already earlier. You write down your plan and so forth. But while you're on the bus and you find things, because I don't know, Kathy, if you got this experience, but you could have the best laid plans, but you get on that route and start riding. Sometimes things can pop up that are surprises, right?
Right. Yep.
Have something to write down or text, or even take a picture with your cell phone that helps you remember some of those challenges. Because I'll tell you what, when you get back off that trip and you're at your destination and you start thinking, wow, that kind of went bad for me. Well, if you have some of that information to rely on and to think about things, maybe perhaps that help you plan for your next trip, right? It'll
Right.
help
Well, I mean,
you relieve some of that stress.
yeah, and it might actually help your trip go that much smoother. If you
Exactly.
need that piece of paper in your pocket just to feel less stressed, well, that piece of paper is worth it, whether it's printed or handwritten, or, like you said, the photo in your mobile phone to make sure that you have that reference so that you can feel secure that you're in the right place at the right time and everything is okay.
Yep. So Kathy,
So,
you know what? You help me a lot. You do, on a variety of things. I'd like to think that I'm a help to you on some things.
you are, this is just
Yes,
such a
yeah,
big hug
yeah.
session
It
today.
is
I
a
just love
hug session,
it. There's a
but
lot of just,
we
yeah.
are here for the people who anytime they want to reach out, we're always here for them to help them learn how to use the system a little more. But what are some ways that we can kind of take and really, before we really start planning our trips, what can we do? We get anxiety. We are so stressed out about taking transit that most of us just don't use it. Some of us just stay home and don't access life, don't get out and enjoy ourselves. Why don't you just take a breath, right?
Yeah, that's
Why don't
one
you
way.
kind of think and meditate maybe on what you're about to do. And I use this word called, or two words, focused observation. Don't be afraid to ask questions about things that don't make sense to you visually. If you're out and you're looking at the route on this time, one time you're on the route, don't be afraid to ask a bus driver, hey, it looked different than the last time, whatever that was, go ahead and talk to your bus driver, about it. And there are other ways, that you can relieve some of that stress, but always has to realize, like, we're here for you, but when we're not, maybe after hours, or if you forget to call us for whatever reason, you can rely on yourself a little bit, right?
Right.
Well,
I mean, I
this
think
process.
One of the things that is good to do is exactly what we're doing right now. Talk about it, bring it up, find somebody that you can have just a conversation about it. And sometimes you realize just by saying it out loud that you're actually okay with it. All it took was saying it out loud, and now you're okay. So, use all of the tools that are available to you. And in that way, you can think of us as one of the tools in your toolbox. We can help you with those things.
Find a process, Kathy, that works for you. It's so helpful, and it allows you to really start gaining that confidence. Because by finding that process that works, the next time you go, hopefully you just start gaining that confidence and showing that you can effectively learn how to ride the bus locally. You can start and build upon that, and you eventually get to where you're going cross country, right?
Yes, absolutely.
You can figure out the schedules. You can figure out the geographical locations that you need to look at. You can figure out the timing. You can learn how to speak to a bus driver. You're going to have plenty of different bus drivers across the country. So all these tools that you have, you can definitely put them to use ultimately when it's time for you to go.
Well, and not just put them to use and get to your destination, but enjoy the trip. I mean, to me, that's a key. Is it's one thing to be able to say, I did it.
Yeah.
But then it's also important that you can say, not only did I do it, but I enjoyed my trip.
I had a blast.
Yes.
Yeah. That's great, Kathy. I love that.
And I think that's the perfect note to finish on, because guess what? We're talked through another half an hour. It's been another transportation talk half an hour. And I think, this has just been such a great show. Really made me feel good to be able to approach things from a fear basis and not just brush over the fact that people just get over your fear.
That's exactly right.
That is not as easy as it is to say.
It is not. No. And I thank you so much, Kathy, for this talk, because it does help. This conversation helps me want to get through the rest of the day because I feel accomplished. I feel thankful, and it kind of moves me along. And if we can just do that and help somebody out there, remember, we're here for you. Call us. Okay.
Absolutely.
You want to FaceTime or Zoom with me or with Kathy, I'm sure we can arrange that without a problem, right?
WhatsApp. You can WhatsApp me. Yes, absolutely.
Ask me to come travel train. You might be a visitor from an out of town area and so forth. Come in and talk to me, and I'll go out on routes with you and help you out. So
sure,
there's no
if
need
you
to
and
stress.
your neighbors are, have mobility issues for whatever reason,
Yes,
and you're
right.
wondering how to do this, you can have Jason and I both show up and we can
Oh,
talk to you
sure.
and your friends and neighbors and talk about how to
Yeah.
do these things. If you're not comfortable with one or the other, we can do both, show up and do this. So
Hey,
we're
you know
here
what,
for
Kathy?
you, and we mean that.
We can actually show up and you can then say that you had the Transportation Talk co-host in person.
Yes. All right. Well,
Okay, Kathy.
Jason, I hope you have a fabulous weekend.
You as well. I hope
Thank
everybody out
you.
there
And
have a
everybody
great
else out
weekend.
there, have a fabulous weekend. And we'll see you in March.
Stay safe, be seen, right?
Yes,
Gotta stay bright out there, everybody.
absolutely. Yeah. All right.